In this series of videos, I'm going to be talking about how I do sermon prep. I was recently asked on my YouTube channel, how do I do sermon prep with Logos 8? The writer said, the person said that they're new to preaching and they're new to the Bible software. How do I use it? And so that's what I'm going to make 3 or 4 videos about this. We'll just work through it. They're going to be a little bit longer than what I normally do. I try to keep them between 5 to 8 minutes. This will be in the 10-minute range and up 10-minute plus range. And I want to say a couple things about sermon preparation. One is there as many different kinds of preachers there are as many different kinds of sermon preparation. So take the monkey off your back of you be you. You find a system that works for you. I've been preaching full-time vocationally for 17 years, and so this is the system I use. I've been a Logos user for close to 2 years. Absolutely love it. It has helped me. It was overwhelming at first, and so the more you use the software, the better it gets. Trust me. Just when you put your own information in there, your clippings, your notes, documents, it just gets better over the long haul. I want to say a couple things philosophically about me as a preacher, so you kind of know where I'm at. Most of my time in Logos is spent with either personal Bible study, but the majority of it is sermon preparation or lesson preparation. And so I believe that it is a privilege to say the things that God has said after him. I'm not after new information. I'm out to guard the deposit, the faith that was handed down to the apostles. 1 Corinthians 15, 1 through 28, the gospel that I received, I pass on to you, that Christ was born, that he died, he was buried, he rose again, he ascended. And so I'm not after new things. Creativity is not my primary aim. It is to say the things God has said after him in the power of the Holy Spirit, even though creativity hopefully is a part of that. But it is really just a privilege to say what God has said in a way that is helpful for the people, as kind of John Stott talks about, between two worlds, the world of the text and the actual world. So, with that being said, you may watch this and think this has nothing to do with me, and that's okay. Maybe you could even share below how you do sermon prep or make your own video about how you do it. I would absolutely love to see. I may be missing something. So this first video, before we talk about what I actually do with the text and my workflow process, my sermon prep guide, I want to talk to you about how I use the clippings document and how I use the note-taking features. And again, most of my stuff is towards sermon prep. And so I do general Bible study in there, but the majority of the time is for sermon prep. I kind of use those together. Those things are not mutually exclusive because I want the text to live in my heart for a while. I want it to sit with me. And so I want it to do its work in my heart at kind of a devotional, spiritual formation level as I preach. And so that's kind of how I do that. Clipping documents. I know people use clippings for all different sorts of things. I do not. I keep one clipping document a week. Whatever clipping document I'm using is for that week's sermon. And I know you can do a lot with clippings. I encourage you to do so if that's a good system for you. But the way I use clippings is I just want one for that week's passage. And so let's say I'm doing a sermon on 1 Corinthians 15, 1 through, we'll say 5, and I'll just label it 1 Corinthians 15, 1 through 5 clippings. What this document does for me, I've been doing this for about 1.5 years, is anytime I'm going through a resource and I find a quote, whether it's a Bible verse, whether it's a commentary quote, a book quote, just some sort of resource, and I want to use that or think about that for my sermon, I put that in the clippings document. Part of my sermon process is to gather as much information as I can because there's really 3 levels for me to a sermon. One is, what does the text say? This is kind of old school, but what does the text say? What's the author, the audience? What does it mean to them before we ever get what it means for me? But what does it mean for them? What's this text saying? I'm going to go through the grammar, word studies. I want to know, what did the original author under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit mean when this was written? The second thing I ask is, so what difference does it make? And this is the tough questions. This is the kind of the stories, not the application, but who cares? Why should anybody pay attention to this? So it's the question of, So what? So now, or what does the text say? So what difference does it make? And then the third question is, now what do we want people to do with it? The application. And I find a lot of preachers are really good at the application part, or some are really good at the kind of the what part. And really, to get that bridge, I think you need all three of information, application, illustration. You need the what, so what, now what, to make a really good sermon. So I have a clippings document. Everything goes into that I'm looking at, and as I go through these videos, I'll probably have an illustration of that. The second thing that I want to say is about my note-taking system. I know there are complaints with people about Logos's note-taking system, and I get those complaints. I understand why, when they're thinking Evernote or OneNote, why Logos's note-taking system would not be sufficient. But for me in my sermon prep, which is the majority of how I use Logos 8, I am in a text directly. So I don't preach thematically. I preach textually and hopefully expositorily. I want to preach in a way, what's God saying in this pericope, in this verse, in this chapter. And so all my notes, for the most part, are connected to a text. And so there's really 4 different kinds of notes that I have. And I want to say this, there's so many ways that you can do notes within Logos. Again, find a system for you. You may be a seminary student, you may be a PhD student, and you may just be at a different place. This is how I use it for sermon prep. But when I look at the note-taking system, I think there are so many options. How in the world am I going to remember it? It's the same with highlighting. How in the world am I going to remember the colors and what they mean? So my system is pretty simple. I want to be able to know what it is right away and just be good with it. And so I've tried to make it as simple as possible. And I have 4 different note categories. And so all I use are 4 different icons, and they're all these kind of Post-it notes right here. Let me open it up to one screen. They're all one. I just used that Post-it note. I guess it's a Post-it note, but it's like the square with the tab up. That's for the most part the only kind of icon I use, and I use 4 different colors: yellow, green, blue, and purple. I've got to remember what all those things mean, so I need it as simple as possible. And this is the system I've come up with. Yellow, if I ever see a yellow note in the text, those are things that I have written and come up with. Those are my own thoughts, because what I'm doing is I'm taking the note system and basically making my own study Bible, so that when I'm listening to someone else's sermon, or I'm listening to a podcast and I go in my text, I want all my notes about the text right there. So almost all my notes are anchored to a point, but for the most part, they're all anchored to a particular verse. Yellow, those are all the things. Those are all my thoughts, my personal notes, whatever I'm thinking about the text. Green are all quotes connected to a text. And so if I'm going through a commentary or a book, and I think I'm going to want that information more than just for this sermon. So clippings are like just for this sermon, but then sometimes that information is really good that I want to remember. I will take that quote, I will copy and paste it into a new note, and it gets a green icon, and then I anchor it to whatever text or texts I'm working through. So yellow, my information. Commentary is green. The 2 other, blue, I do some daily journaling in Logos, and I will anchor it to a daily journal date. But then whatever text I'm in that day, I'll anchor it through the text. The first thing in the blue note is the date. And then whatever I'm journaling. And so I always have my journal now as a note system connected to my Bible. So I can, throughout the years, when I go back through the text, I'll be able to see where I was at any given day, instead of just opening a page for a date. When I open up the Word, my journal gets to be there. I'm just loving that system. And then the last one, I've just started doing this within the last maybe 3 weeks, is if I find an illustration I like connected to a text, to copy that into a note and give it a purple icon. And so whenever I'm in the text, I see purple, I know it's illustration. Blue, it's my daily journal. Green, it's a quote from a commentary or book. And yellow, my thoughts about that text. So over time, my notes are getting just better and better and better. And so I look forward to using Logos for years to come. So those are kind of the beginning process of how I set up when I think of notes and clippings. Clippings, it's a short-term document for me. I'm going to send a quote or a thought or whatever I want into that clippings document so it can be at the ready. Sometimes Wednesday or Thursday, I will print that off and actually highlight that clippings document. And I just want it to work in my heart. I want the text, and I want to see what people I trust in the church have said about that text. And so hopefully this will help you as you think through your process. Clippings for me, short-term document, everything in one place that I can print off. I delete it the next week. I'm not going to need that information. Anything that I come across as I'm preparing a sermon that I'm going to want longer, I use the note-taking system, 4 colors, yellow for my stuff, green for commentary, blue for daily journal, purple for illustrations, and then I anchor those to a text, and so it becomes kind of this ongoing study Bible. So in the next video, we're going to talk about how I actually study the Word. Once I've got a text chosen, what do I do with that information? How do I work through the text before I ever get to a commentary or my sermon prep guide? So until next time, God bless.